This lesson is on solving literal equations, and this is actually part 2 of this lesson. So if you click on the link in the upper right-hand corner, you can go see part 1. All right, so literal equations are equations that involve more than one variable. Basically, you're just rearranging the equation to get a certain variable by itself, or in other words, to solve for that variable. So the sorry, this is a really challenging topic for most students. The only way to get good at this is to practice this. So I have these top 4 examples here because I want to show the difference between solving these because they're just subtle differences. All right, so in each of these, we're going to solve for x. So in this first one, to get the x by itself, I got to get rid of the r and I got to get rid of the t. So similar to solving equations with numbers, we want to do the adding or subtracting first. So I'm going to get rid of the t by subtracting t on both sides of the equation. So minus t minus t. So t minus t is 0. P minus t, those are unlike terms. You can't subtract them, so we just write p minus t equals x times r. Now I have x times r, so to get rid of the r, I divide both sides by r. So the r's will simplify to 1. So flip this around and you get x equals p minus t divided by r. Right, now the next one, the reason I put this one on here, I wanted to show you, so this is all multiplication, right? So to get rid of the r, you would divide. To get rid of the t, you would divide. We can do that all in one step. So instead of dividing by r and then dividing by t, you can just divide both sides by rt. So rt over rt is 1, and p over rt gives me my answer. I'm going to flip it around, and I get x equals p divided by rt. Put a box around these so you know those are the answers. All right, on this next one, try to get the x by itself. So I have addition here, and I also have division. So if you go back to solving two-step equations, when you have an equation like this with numbers, the first thing you want to do is get rid of this fraction. So I want to get rid of this r in the denominator. So I do that by multiplying both sides by r. So over here I'll multiply by r over 1. This side I'll multiply by r. The r's cross simplify to 1 and 1. Over here, instead of writing rp, I'm going to write pr because we typically like to write them in alphabetical order. And then x plus t. Now keep in mind rp is the same thing as pr. The order of multiplication doesn't matter, but in algebra the standard is to put them in alphabetical order. And so now I have plus t, so I subtract t from both sides. So t minus t is 0. pr minus t, I just write pr minus t. Those are unlike terms. You can't subtract those. But again, flip this around and write x equals p times r minus t. Now on this one, it's very similar, except that the variable in the denominator is actually what I'm trying to solve for. But I'm still going to do the same first step. I'm going to multiply both sides by x. So these x's cross simplify to 1. So I have p x equals r, that was plus sign, r plus t. To get rid of the p, I do the opposite operation and divide by p. And so I end up with x equals r plus t over p. All right, now this last one on this slide I want to show you. I'm solving this for x, so I want to get rid of the y. So you would divide both sides by y. So a lot of students have trouble when I have a fraction divided by, so I have s over t divided by y. They're like, oh, how do I do that? Well, dividing by y, I want to show you, it's the same thing as multiplying by 1 over y. So if I multiply this by 1 over y, and multiply this side by 1 over y, again, that's the same thing as dividing by y. It's just like if I wanted to do 4 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is the same thing as 4 times 1/2. So x divided by y, xy divided by y is the same thing as multiplying by 1 over y. So these y's cross simplify to 1. And over here, s times 1 is s, and t times y is just t times y. So another way of thinking of this is you're moving the y from the numerator to the denominator. All right, so the last thing I want to show you here is how to use factoring in solving literal equations. So this comes up when your variable shows up twice in the equation. So we're solving this for x, and I have 2 x's in here. So the first thing you want to do is get the x's on the same side of the equation. So let's get the x's on the same side. So I'm going to move this rx over to the right side. And I'm going to do that by subtracting rx from both sides. So rx minus rx is 0. So what I have is p equals mx minus rx. All right. Now once we get to this point, this is where factoring comes in. So what I want to do is factor out the x. So remember, factoring is the opposite of distributive property. So instead of multiplying something in, you're dividing something out. So what you're really doing here is you're dividing both of these by x, and that x comes out in front of the parentheses, and mx divided by x is just m, rx divided by x is just r, and so I end up with this. So again, I'm pulling the x out of this. Now I'm at this point, and I need to get the x by itself, so I want to get rid of this m minus r. Well, this is being multiplied. This is x times that. So I do the opposite and divide both sides by m minus r. So the m minus r divided by m minus r, that's 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. And I'm left with x equals p divided by m minus r. So again, what you want to do is get the variables on the same side and then factor out the variable. All right, so here's another example of this. So I have 2 x's, so I know I'm going to have to factor here. So first, let's get this x out of the denominator, similar to what we did on the last slide. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x. So now I have tx equals, these x's cross simplify to 1, equals x plus r. Now I have something that looks like this first equation we did. Now I want to get the variables on the same side, get the x's on the same side, what I'm solving for. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. So tx, sorry, x, tx minus x equals r. And this is where the factoring comes in. So I'm going to factor out the x. And so tx divided by x is t. Now x divided by x, anything divided by itself is equal to 1. So that's t minus 1. Now if you think about it, if I distributed this x back in, would I end up with what I started with? I'd have t times x minus x times 1 is x. So yes. So now I'm here. Now I want to get rid of the t minus 1, so I divide both sides by t minus 1. Those cross simplify to 1, and x equals r divided by t minus 1. All right, so again, this is a tough topic. This is one of the toughest topics for my students. The way that you get better at this is by practicing it. So I hope that this was helpful. If so, give it a like and a subscribe, and feel free to leave me a comment. Until next time.